Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do a weekly book review. This week, I read Party of Two by Jasmine Guillory. Jasmine Guillory has a few other books within the contemporary romance genre, and this is one of them. It's a fiction piece that was released in 2020, and she's clearly gotten this sort of writing down pat, because she has a bunch of other books. So if you do read this and you enjoy it, I would definitely recommend checking those out. Party of Two is the quintessential love story in which opposites attract. The difference from the other love stories that you may have read are the occupations of each character. So before we get into more of the plot and the analysis here, I want to talk a little bit about how these characters are written. So these characters are written in a very self-explanatory manner. And what I mean by that is their flaws, their strengths, and their fears are openly acknowledged verbally by each. That means that there's little left to the imagination, and for the most part, you can take what they're saying and thinking at face value because it's true. And this is good for the audience because you don't have to, question the motives of the characters. They're like openly stating, what their issues are. But it's also a little frustrating because I don't know about you, when a character knows what their issues are or what their flaws may be and does nothing to fix them, that annoys me. You just coming out and stating that you have trust issues. Okay, so what are you gonna do about it? But all in all, what this really means for us is that you don't really have to think too much into the plot. Whereas opposed to a book I read a few weeks ago called Who is Maud Dixon, that was a book where you really had to question everything because we knew that everything wasn't as it seemed. So this is definitely one of those books where you can kind of just, take a chill pill and just read, just have fun. Now, the draw for the audience, obviously, would mainly be the occupations, like I said before. So in this piece, one of our main characters is a politician, the other is a lawyer. And so them falling in love is kind of like, it's cool to see because we're kind of able to look behind the curtain and just observe, people that are in politics and that fall in love just like everyone else because they're people as well. And so there's some type of fascination I think that we have with that. In my opinion, that's one of the reasons why a show like Scandal was so, popular and successful. Obviously, they had a lot of scandal and, really good storylines, but just being able to see like, oh, this is how, our politicians live. That's kind of cool. So, and lastly, when it comes to perspective, we have kind of like an omnipresent thing going on here. And that just means that we're everywhere. We can see everything. We can see the situation through each character's eyes, so we're able to kind of get a full picture of what's going on as well as past events. We're in the know about that. So again, it gives us all of the necessary information to just enjoy the story. We don't really have to think too hard, but I did think a little hard. So with the themes here, the first one being love. Now this one is kind of obvious. With Olivia and Max, those are our two characters. We see their relationship form. So we see the initial introduction from how they met, as well as them forming a friendship, and then ultimately a deep emotional bond that leads to a relationship. And then we follow the relationship highs and lows and all of the obstacles that they encounter. So that's definitely something that is heavily in focus in this book, and it's really what the plot, lies around, is their relationship. The next thing, funnily enough, is self-love. So, obviously this is a form of love as well. But what we find is that our characters, the two main ones in particular, have self-love when it comes to indulging in desserts. They love desserts. And throughout the book, at any given scene in the book, we see that desserts are used to symbolize either a thank you or a I love you or forgive me. So these are just things that the desserts are present, during these times of happiness or anguish or even intoxication. So when their guards are down, they use desserts to comfort themselves and their relationship ultimately. Which is fine, But I will say, if you're going to read this book, what you need to do is pour you a glass of wine, okay? Get some cake or a donut or a box of donuts or something and just sit and chill. Because Guillory writes desserts so detailed that I started wanting cake, and I don't really like cake like that, but her just continuing to talk about yellow cake with chocolate frosting, like I was picturing it in my mind, 3 layers, how good it would be, how soft. Just get yourself some, a little snack, and then sit down and read. It's not going to take you long to read. It's a fairly short story, so. And then next, I want to hit on just food in general, just because I think this is an indication on where along the self-love journey our characters are. I think that's also an indication for all of us, when you're not doing so great, or maybe you went through a traumatic event or a breakup or something like that, or even a depression. One sign that you're not, you don't have enough self-love maybe could be that you're not eating well. So when Olivia and Max's relationship went through kind of a rough patch, we saw that Max just physically looked malnourished. And so I think that says something, for the whole taking care of yourself, that it's necessary to do so before, during, and after whatever relationship or even situation, whether it's a job or it's a friendship or, a romance. It's important to kind of have a set standard for yourself of how you're going to love yourself, And desserts are fine. That's cool. But homeboy, he wasn't eating at all. Also, let's just talk about this. And this is just me being annoyed. This is a grown man, okay? Our characters are in their late 30s, early 40s, and he doesn't eat vegetables. Let me just take the time to let everyone know, everyone who listens to me, it is not acceptable for you to be a grown person, okay, and not eat vegetables. That's ridiculous. And it's not cute. It's not quirky. I don't think it's funny. I think it's sad. Y'all are not, seriously, y'all are out here not eating food, like real food. You just out here eating pizza and stuff. That's ridiculous. Anyway, back to the review. So the next theme I wanted to hit on was secrecy. This is a career necessity with both Max and Olivia. Olivia is a lawyer. Max is a politician. So Max operates on a certain level of secrecy automatically in order to protect his professional integrity. And that's kind of self-explanatory. But the way that we see this panning out is through the use or non-use of PDA. So when they first get together, PDA is restricted between the two of them to maintain privacy at first. But what we see is after they, announce themselves to the public, it's used as a measurement tool later to see, where the relationship stands. So we all know that, unfortunately, celebrities, their private lives and politicians and all that stuff, their private lives become sort of a tool to either show that they're happy or it's an indication that something isn't right. So we do see PDA being a good kind of gauge of where on the secrecy scale we are. And lastly, disguise. Max has disguises that he wears out. The purpose is just to hide himself and enjoy life without the celebrity treatment, while also getting to know Olivia a little bit more. So that is a big part of their storyline. It's just getting to know each other in secret. So that's another added layer and possibly a draw for the audience to kind of watch that pan out. Most of us don't have to hide our relationship, but some people do, and for different reasons. So that was one thing that was very prominent in this book. And lastly, I wanted to talk about worthiness. So this comes both in worthiness of love, but also worthiness of acceptance. I think with love, both of our characters struggle to accept the other partner's love. And this could be mainly because they're not understanding how the person is showing them love. And that's where communication comes into play. But I think it's just, something internally that maybe they don't feel like they're worthy of their partner. And I do hear this a lot. Some people don't think they're good enough for their partner, like in entertainment world, like movies and things like that. But I think that's something that both of them struggle with on different levels, of course, but it's there. And of acceptance. So there's an interesting layer being that Olivia is a Black woman and Max is a white man. and he's also a politician. So there is a heavy kind of aspect lurking in the background that Olivia doesn't necessarily think that she'll be accepted as a white politician's girlfriend. And so she's kind of hesitant. That adds another layer to their relationship to even, continue this romance, even though it's true love, but knowing that politics, it's a whole nother level. Everything's up for what's the word I'm looking for? Scrutiny. Alrighty, so let's talk about our characters here. First, we have Olivia Monroe. This is one of our main characters. She is a lawyer. Because she is a lawyer, professionally, she has to be persistent in order to gain clients. She has to be confident in order to present cases, obviously. And she has to be determined when gathering and sifting through evidence. Her personal qualities, however, are that she's persistent, she's confident, and she's ambitious. So what we see is that her personality, lines up very well with her career choice. And what this says about her character is that ultimately she's a little flawed. She's narcissistic in a way because she believes a lot of her past relationships failed due to the other party. She's not really looking into herself at all and not acknowledging a lot of her internal struggle. And this is mainly her being confident when it comes to romance. Her, saying, look, I expect and will only accept better than, the past guys that I've dated. And so I think that she's a very driven person. She's also somewhat of a workaholic. She's not a terrible person. This is just me kind of like digging deep here. But she definitely has her own struggles and her own issues. Max Powell is a politician and a past prosecutor. For his profession, he has to have personality. He's the face of the people. He has to have charisma, garnering support for his bills and his legislation, and he has to have knowledge of laws and regulation. His personal qualities are that he's very ambitious, he's very positive, and he's arrogant in the sense that he believes that not that he can't make a wrong decision, but that every decision will work, whether it works itself out or he'll make it work. And the arrogance comes into play that he doesn't really take a lot of time to consider, all of his options. He's just like, all right, we're just going to go with this because it feels right at the time. And whatever happens, it'll happen. And these two drive each other crazy because Olivia is a very methodical person. She has a procedure. She has to think about things. Max is not like that. But Max is also a flawed character, and he's a little bit of a narcissist as well because, again, he believes that almost every decision he makes will work out. So he's not like flawed terribly, but he's not thinking in reality. He just doesn't think things through. He's just thinking in the moment with his emotions and his feelings. And that may work for him, but that's not going to work for the relationship. So he also at times fails to recognize other people's experiences besides his own. Even when he complains, he's complaining about something in reference to his own life and not necessarily the situation. So he was a little annoying to read, but it was more about how these flaws clashed with each other and how that kind of worked against the relationship. Okay, next we have Jamila, who is one of the supporting characters. And the reason I want to talk about her a little bit is because she is someone who is working in a community center. She's helping the people in her community. And she deals with a lot of, overshadowing or her bosses taking credit for her work. And I wanted to touch on imposter syndrome because I feel like there were some slight symptoms of this, but she definitely is confident in her ability. She just doesn't know how to assert herself necessarily. So there was a lot of good advice from Olivia on claiming your achievements. And I just wanted to let everyone know, if anyone else is struggling with this, that emailing and putting things in writing is a big part of, tracking your success. Whether that's making decisions via email or, making your suggestions that may work out in the end, write everything down, because you'll have that later to back you up. But also claim your achievements without being arrogant, of course, but, not being afraid to say, hey, like I did this, that was my idea, or I contributed to this, or I put the work in, You don't have to be rude about it, but it's important for us to, kind of let it be known. I know how that feels to be intimidated when someone else takes credit for your work, especially if they're someone at a higher level than you or your boss possibly. But if you don't claim it and nobody knows, they're never going to know. Now, back to imposter syndrome. This is when you have self-doubt from undervaluing your competence and attribute accomplishments to external factors. This is something I think has been on the rise with women. I think I read somewhere that, oftentimes we attribute our success to other people or other things, or, oh, you just got the job because so-and-so, didn't want it or something like that. Listen, for anyone out there struggling with this, own your stuff. You're doing amazing, you're working hard, and you got that job because you work hard, not because someone else didn't want it or, whatever, some other nonsense. But I thought that was important to touch on because I just saw a little bit of that. Jamila isn't like the picture perfect poster person for imposter syndrome, but I did want to hit on that because it sounded very familiar. Alrighty, so when it comes to my review, so I think the purpose of this book was really just to be very light and to enjoy it. Like I said earlier, I thought it was the average romance story. I'm probably not going to reread it, but that's just because I feel like I know everything I need to know about these characters. We've seen this play out before, this whole star-crossed lovers. It's a little bit different because these are grown people now, and they have careers and, different paths and conversations about finances and children and things like that. So that made it a little more interesting, but there's nothing I feel like I need to revisit this book for, but it did certainly give me a nice little relaxing few hours after last week's episode talking about American politics. That was draining. So if you're looking for something fun, this is certainly a good book. I think the main takeaway of this is that rom-com books that are equivalent to like the Netflix, rom-coms are just as needed in the world as a political as a political analysis. Books like last week are super informative, but you certainly need stuff like this just for pure entertainment. You may not like learn about laws and stuff, but it's certainly, I think, the reason why a lot of people read as much, just for pure entertainment and not necessarily for information. So I think that I would certainly recommend this book to anyone who is specifically looking for it, though. Like, this isn't anything deep. There's no mystery. There's no like death involved in it. So don't have to solve a murder. No one's missing. It's just a love story. So I certainly recommend it. Target is very good for having these type of books on their shelf. That's where I got this one from. So I have throughout the months gathered a few of them, and if I feel like I need a week to just relax and have a good read, I'll just pull one of these out. So very good. I loved it. And I will see you guys next week. I hope everyone has a good, safe weekend. I know where I'm at. I think we're getting a little bit of bad weather. So I hope everyone stays safe, and thank you for joining me.